Hello everyone, this is Chris with Secret Fab, and today I'm with our 2025 Toyota 4Runner, and obviously it's getting a little bit late, but I just wanted to shoot the intro to this video so I could get this install done early in the morning. What we are installing is the K&N 63 series intake. They also have a 77 series. Let me flash some photos so you can see a comparison, just a visual comparison of these two. You can see the 63 series is a roto-molded intake, so it has your traditional air box, kind of like the stock one, but a little bit bigger with a conical filter instead of this flat panel filter that comes with the vehicle. And the 77 series looks a little bit more aftermarket because it has a heat shield that butts up against the hood and makes a seal there so that you don't get a lot of hot air into your intake, which drives down engine performance. We might install one of those in our Land Cruiser because not only do these intakes fit the 4Runner, but they also fit the 2024 and up Toyota Land Cruiser and the 2024 and up Toyota Tacoma. Both the 2.4 liter gas engine and then the 2.4 liter gas engine with the hybrid system. The next couple of photos that I want to show you guys are the dyno graphs of both of these. I don't know if they were done on the same exact dynos, so the outputs could be very different, and any number of things could change the output from vehicle to vehicle, and also the temperature it was run at. They were both run in the same gear, so that shouldn't make any real difference there. So according to these dyno charts, the 63 series yields 15.6 horsepower peak gain, while the 77 series yields 15.28 horsepower peak gain. And the torque numbers for the 63 series is 20.7 foot-pounds of torque peak gain and 25.33 foot-pounds of torque peak gain for the 77 series. So the 77 series seems to edge it out a little bit more in torque and a little bit less in horsepower. Remember, when you try to compare dyno graphs, make sure that they're using the same scale across the RPMs and the power and torque on the left side so that you get kind of a fair comparison. Not only do you want peak gain, but really you want the area in between the baseline dyno and the dyno after the modification to be nice and fat. The bigger that area is, the more power and torque you're getting across the entire power band. A lot of the times when you have a cold air intake, you can see kind of a little trade-off at the bottom. However, we don't have a large trade-off at the bottom of either of these dyno graphs. It doesn't produce a lot of extra power or torque in the low RPMs below 2000, but then it starts to open up a little bit. Let me get a little sleep, and after the gym tomorrow, we'll get right into this install. All right, it's a new day, so let's get this installation started. First off, I want to give you guys some sound clips of the stock airbox so we can compare later to the K&N 63 series. Let's not kid ourselves. Some of you guys are going to want this intake, partially because of the sound it makes. So since the vehicle wasn't under any load, you're not going to hear any of the turbo flutters really. All right, I'm filming this at the end, but I'm going to insert it at the beginning of the install. That they provide that instruction sheet and it tells you exactly what you're supposed to have. So I would do a quick inventory and make sure you have all of that. I think I was missing 3 bolts to mount this up, but I was provided extra ones of these. So I got through that. And then I think I was missing 1 small lock washer for this corner. I'm not going to use it. I think I'll be fine. And I'm pretty sure I was missing the block off plate in case I had installed this onto a Land Cruiser. K&N provides a customer service number in that instruction sheet so you can let them know what you are missing. And if you have any issues during this install for any other reason, if this video for some reason isn't good enough to get you through the install, you can give them a call as well. All right, the first thing they want you to do is to remove the negative battery terminal. This could be for a couple of reasons. Sometimes they don't want you to work on a vehicle with any of the electrical systems hooked up. The second reason is they might want the ECU to kind of reset to relearn the driving patterns and the amount of air that it's taking in and things like that. If you have a gas vehicle, your battery is going to be under the hood. And if you have a hybrid vehicle, it's going to be on the driver's side in the back cargo area. Just FYI, that was done with a 10mm socket. K&N has instructions for all of this online, but they also provide you this huge document so that the instructions are really clear and you have a paper copy. The next thing we're going to remove is this little intake adapter. I love these push pins. They're really easy to use. You just push down on them and pull them out. To reset them, you push it all the way up and then you'll put it back in there and then push it flat. Let's store this in a safe place so that we don't lose it. It looks like in the Tacoma, there's another push pin right here, but in the 4Runner, there is one right over here. Let's remove that one as well. And there's actually one here and one here. Let's also remove this one right here. Now we can lift this up and out. The next thing we have to do is remove this connector from the mass airflow sensor. You just push down really hard on it. And the next thing they want you to do is remove this harness from this little clip. Actually go in right here with a flathead screwdriver and kind of wedge it in there and pry up. And then it'll open up just like that. And we can remove the wire. Now they want us to loosen the hose clamp that secures the factory intake tube to the turbo inlet, which is down here. I'm still using a 10 mil to do this. At this point, they tell you we should be able to remove the airbox with this intake tube. If you guys have problems doing that, you can loosen this one up as well and just start with this intake tube and then remove the box. Let's pull on this intake tube. Came out pretty easy. Of course, this is pretty much a brand new vehicle still. Pull this straight out. No problem. Came out really easily. Let's set that to the side. All right, now they want us to remove these 3 little posts which the stock airbox sat on. These are also 10 mil. However, I had to get a deeper socket to grab these. You can see this little ball is a little tall. All right, now we are working around this charge tube assembly and we want to remove these spring clips so we can get this out of here. Just open them up by pushing on them. It loosens up this collar and we can pull this straight out. All right, on the end where the charge pipe was connected to the intercooler, they want us to remove this vent line, so you can use some pliers. Or in my case, what I found real quick were some rusty channel locks. Pinch that little clamp so you can pull this straight off. Just make sure you don't lose this. All right, now they want us to remove this solenoid mounting bolt, which is 12 millimeters. Now we're disconnecting this vacuum switch electrical connection. Now we have to remove the 2 manifold mounting nuts and slide the housing off the turbo inlet. This one is a little bit easier to get to than the one on the other side. This is still 12 millimeters. You don't have to use a lot of force to get these off. The one on the right side is buried a little deeper, so I have to use an extension on it. All right, if you're short like me, you might want to use a step stool because that nut is probably pretty easy to lose. I'm going to slide this off. I'm going to remove all the hoses that are being held by it so I can pull it out. All right, at the very bottom of this piece, it was being held down by this electrical connector, which I had to unclip and remove so I could pull this assembly up. All right, now I'm rotating this over, and there's a vent line right here that they want us to remove. All right, now we're using an 8mm socket to remove this sensor from that housing. There's only a bolt on one side. All right, that guy was really in there. It just broke free after I used a little force. Disconnect that vacuum line and set all of that aside. Oh, just wait. Take that gasket off because you're going to need to put it on the K&N part. All right, now we're finally getting to where we're pulling some K&N parts out. This is the K&N turbo inlet flange. And here's that gasket. It's kind of keyed right there. Slip it right in. All right, starting to reverse this installation a little bit. We're going to install this K&N turbo inlet onto the turbo and secure it with the factory mounting nuts. All right, now we're installing this K&N provided coupler and hose clamp. There are about 3 hose clamps that look to be about the same size, and then one's a little bit bigger. Let me slip this coupler over here first. Seat it all the way to the back. And put this hose clamp on top. Of course, you can either use a screwdriver, or what I prefer to use is an 8mm socket. They want you to rotate this around a little bit so you can get it all the way to the back, or at least very close to the back. Maybe leave just a little bit of spacing there. And then we'll clamp it down. Make sure it's fairly even. I'm actually going to rotate this to the right a little bit because I don't want it to mess up the threads right here. All right, go ahead and wash your hands and grab the K&N mass airflow adapter, and then they want you to put this gasket onto the back of it, just like that. Peel the backing off, align it with that rectangular opening, and note the orientation with these holes and the kind of cut out for those holes right there. And then just press down firmly. Flip it back over, and this is where you're going to install the factory mass airflow sensor. All you need to remove the factory mass airflow sensor is a Phillips head screwdriver. And then you can install that onto the K&N adapter. All right, I had a little bit of a scare. If you install this backwards, and you might not know that it's backwards, the holes will not line up. So take it out and flip it until it makes more sense. So K&N provides these fine threaded metric bolts to screw in that mass airflow sensor to their adapter. All right, now you want to install the mass airflow assembly into the K&N intake tube, and you want it to be in this orientation. So the electrical connector is right here at the bottom, and this hole is right here at the bottom as well. You don't want it to be in this orientation. These are the fine threaded bolts that they provide, and you're going to use a 10mm socket on them. They don't provide torque specs, so just make sure this is firm, but you don't need to crank down as hard as you can. All right, now it says assemble the provided ejector fitting, vacuum hose, and vacuum fitting as shown. This little hose clamp is 7mm. All right, we'll put this on first, and then we'll slip this hose over this, come back with this, and tighten it down. On the other end of this hose, we just connect this by slipping this in like so. All right, now we have to squish what seems like a really big grommet into this hole. So just kind of rotate it around, squish it in there until it goes in. Just a little bit more squishing. All right, and according to the instructions, orientation like this. This should go right into here like so. All right, I won't lie, the struggle is gonna feel pretty real trying to finagle this into here without pushing the grommet all the way through. It was already hard to get that grommet in there. So when I put it in here, I kind of angled one edge into there, and then now I'm just trying to finagle it and be very gentle. All right, well, it popped back out, but let me show you how I did this. You stick one end in, and then you kind of twist it because you want to get underneath there. And then you can twist it around and try to gently work its way in there, but you don't want to push the grommet through, which I've already done once. All right, I won't lie, I got so close to drilling this out just a little bit to make it just a little bit wider because it was hard to put the gasket in there and then not push it through when I tried to insert this. So I did it. If you guys have any tips for people, please put them in the comments section below. All right, now we install this intake hose assembly onto the turbo inlet. You're going to grab one of these hose clamps, the same size as the one you used before, slip it over there. You might have to loosen it up a little bit, and then you just finagle this tube into there, seat this. All right, I'm going to actually leave this hose clamp loose because I'm not sure of the final orientation of this tube. I'll go ahead and tighten that down later. And on this mass airflow sensor adapter and mass airflow sensor, you might have noticed that I had removed that. I thought I could get leverage to get this in, but that didn't help at all. So I reinstalled this. All right, this is the adapter for that conical air filter that they use, and we're going to install it into this housing, just like so. And these bolts, they look like this, and they're 10 mil. Okay, so I forgot to note this in the beginning. If you're using this video to install this on a 2024 and up Toyota Land Cruiser, they don't use the underhood fresh air duct, so you will skip that step in the very beginning. And our next step here is to install this box. On this side, make sure this fender opening aligns because that will probably keep you from seating this in properly. And then you make sure these 3 little holes where you took the mounting bolts out from the factory one, make sure those align. And they say secure using the provided hardware, which what we have left are these screws right here. And they have a locking washer and a normal flat washer. After we get all of this tightened down, they note on the Land Cruiser, they do have a block-off plug onto the underhood fresh air intake duct, because you will want to block this portion off. All right, just for reference, here is a 2024 Toyota Land Cruiser, and you can see no duct right here. Back to tightening this down on this one, I did have to use the ratchet so I could make a 90-degree angle and get in there. You can't insert a straight screwdriver and kind of hit this last one. All right, now we use this coupler right here and the 2 remaining hose clamps. We'll rotate this intake tube over. Insert it there. So now I can tighten this one down, and that one down here that I didn't tighten earlier. All right, now we have to reinstall that factory charge tube. Just twist it in there. Make sure the clamps are secure. Give it a little tug. Make sure it's not coming out. And you're good to go with that step. All right, K&N provides this vent hose, and one side is actually smaller. And you remember from earlier when I removed that clamp with those rusty channel locks? They want you to put this on the smaller end. And I want to say that it takes a little finagling to get this in as well, because this tube is pretty big compared to this clamp. Now we're going to install this right here on the open end of the charge tube fitting. I'm gonna slide it over there. Probably gonna have to use those clamps to open that back up. All right, and then the other end installs over this ejector fitting that we set up earlier. All right, and the other end installs over the largest hole in that little ejector fitting that we set up earlier. Just slide it all the way down. All right, there's a step earlier in the instructions that I skipped over on accident. It was connecting this one hose that has this little cover over here. I think this is a little heat shield right on that end. And we're connecting it to this barb. Of course, the bigger of the two. And then that sensor with the hose, we're connecting to the smaller barb. We can go ahead and reconnect the mass airflow sensor. It'll click in. All right, for this vacuum sensor bracket that we're going to use, they do provide a bolt. It is a little bit shorter. You can't reuse the factory bolt because it's too long. They also provide a flat washer and a lock washer. If you need a little review, the flat washer goes on the very end. So you should put that lock washer on first and then the flat washer. All right, so I've already done this part because it's really hard to get a camera in here. They provide this bracket right here, and it's to mount this sensor. You're going to use their bolt and not the factory bolt right here because you need it to be shorter. And just for shits and giggles, they made this 1/2 inch. So you'll have to use 1/2 inch socket on there. Then there's this provided hardware right here. You got the nut, you got the washer, you got the screw. And you'll want to put it on the left side of this sensor and have the sensor kind of go across that bracket because this connector is really short. But then just connect it, pop it in, make sure all these little lines are not being pinched, and then you're pretty much good to go. These last few steps are pretty simple and they make sense. You got to get that air filter down in here. Get it over that. You'll have to get that 8mm back out and tighten this all down. All right, before you cinch this all the way down, reach around there and make sure it is fully seated and make sure this is below this line because next you have your pre-filter that goes on top. You have that guy right there. All right, this side down, this right above it, and we sandwich it with this. Align everything, and then use the supplied hardware to bolt this down. Again, this screw, lock washer, and then a flat washer. On the part where I mounted the box to the vehicle, I think we were actually missing the correct bolts, but they still had these and they fit. And I actually think I was missing the block-off plate in case I was installing this onto a Land Cruiser. Of course, K&N can provide those parts. They actually provide a number in the instructions that you can reach out and call someone. All right, the moment of truth. Let's fire this up, and like K&N says, let's listen for any leaks. Oh yeah, probably would help if I reconnect the negative battery terminal. All right, I don't hear anything, so let's go ahead and reinstall this factory duct. Here's those push fasteners where I said you have to pop them out, insert them into the hole, and then just push them flat. Of course, intakes, exhausts, and whatnot, those little bolt-on mods pair really well with tuning usually, and that's what really unlocks a lot more gains. All right, I don't know if you guys can hear this, but I definitely can from inside of the cabin.
What?
You can hear that turbo flutter when the vehicle is actually under load. Of course, you're building more boost. I can hear it kind of whine the entire time I'm accelerating. All right, so there you guys have it. That was the install of the K&N 63 series on our 2025 Toyota 4Runner. If you guys want to pick this up, you can find it on my site at stickerfab.com. Please like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and hit the bell notification icon for the latest and greatest things I'm coming out with for the 2025 and up Toyota 4Runner.